Hi, everyone. It's Vince Molinaro, and welcome to this episode of the Lead the Future podcast. I'm excited to introduce our guest for this episode, Mr. Ron Harper, who is the president and CEO of JFE Power Canada Incorporated, formerly Cogent Power Incorporated. And for the past 25 years, Ron has led the growth of JFE Power Canada to be one of the largest and most diversified suppliers of steel materials and components in North America. He has decades of senior leadership experience building differentiated and value-based strategies, leading to significant growth in manufactured products across Canada, with a strong focus on people-centric cultures, technology, and client-focused innovation and value. He's held numerous board member responsibilities with several nonprofit organizations with missions towards the achievement of manufacturing excellence with lean practice, training and development of people and teams, and advising on the growth of the manufacturing sector in Ontario and Canada. Welcome, Ron, to the Lead the Future podcast. We really appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Thanks very much, Vince. It's my honor to be here and chat with you about these important subjects.
So for those who are listening or watching and don't really know about JFE Shoji, tell us a little bit about your company and obviously your role within your organization.
Sure. Our company's been in business in the western part of Toronto for 50 years. This is our 50th year of operation. Our market and business supplies components and materials that make up what are called electrical steels. Most people have probably not heard of electrical steels, but specifically they're used in a couple of electrical devices that really our modern society relies on. Electrical steels go into electric transformers and to motors and generators. They don't have a lot of applications outside of that, but given our path to decarbonize and electrify our societies, our business and our market are integrally important and are going to be more in the headlines as time moves on. Our company is owned by JFE Holdings in Japan. We were acquired by them a few years ago, and I've been the CEO here for about 15 years, but as you said, I've been with the company over 25. So really happy to share our story with you today.
And over the last few years, certainly coming out of the pandemic, what were some of the challenges that you and your leaders and teams faced during that period?
Well, coming out of the pandemic, the timing has proven to be really interesting on a number of fronts. One, our raw materials, electrical steel raw materials, are made globally. It's a small niche product in the wider steel world, and sorry, I got a phone call. In the wider steel world, it's a very niche product, and there's really only a dozen or so companies around the world that manufactures in large quantities high-grade electrical steel. So global supply chains and all of the disruptions with ocean freight, container freight, et cetera, were a real challenge as the supply chains got so severely disrupted around the world. That created a lot of shortages. The other thing that happened is a little bit kind of more deep understanding of the supply market. I'll try to simplify it. The demand for electrical steel, specifically the type that goes into automotive traction motors for electric vehicles, has really started to significantly grow, particularly in Asia first. And most of the electrical steel, high-grade electrical steel producers also were highly demanded to increase their motor core production. So there was shifts going on in terms of grade mix that just caused, on top of supply chain and transportation challenges, the challenges of a shortage of supply happened starting in about 2021, and it really took 18 to 24 months for that even to get to a point where supply and demand kind of matched each other. So that was a severe challenge for our industry. Fortunately for us, we have great relationships strategically with our supply partners, and we were one of the few that did not run short of raw materials, so that really helped. But through the pandemic, that was a big challenge. Now, we have the challenge on the other end with the need to renew and expand the electrical grid to deal with the high expectations of electrification going forward. Our product demand for transformers right now, electric transformers, is absolutely off the charts. Both Canadian and US OEMs are trying to grow their output by 30 to 40% right now to meet the growing demand for new transformers and replacing the aged infrastructure that we have. So there's a combination of so many things that are causing so much volatility for us that it's presented us some big challenges.
So, how do you kind of keep it together personally, as the president and CEO, but then lead your teams through this period of complexity? Because, on one hand, the demand is great, so I'm assuming that's great for business, but it's a challenging time, as you state. So how do you lead through that?
I think what's most important, there's a couple things that are really important with that. It's important that everyone has a vision of what's going on and how we see our business working through this. So they need to see a path through that. Otherwise, handling that volatility is really difficult. And supporting people in the emotional ups and downs that they're going to deal with. The pandemic created for all of us a real emotional strain because of isolation and other things. Yeah. And as we came out of the back end of that, our business circumstances increased that as well on people. So we need to be supportive, and we need to have people a clear vision of where things are going. The other thing we worked on really hard was sharing as much information as we could on a very regular basis with our people, so that they knew what was going on, what was happening. Because I find people who know what's happening and why it's going on, and even if the future and what's coming is a little uncertain or a lot uncertain, they can manage that a little bit more better when they have the information and understand that what we're trying to do with that. So that clarity is really important.
Yeah, so we're going to come back to that point, because that's certainly in our work together. I've seen it. It's an area that you really excel at. I think what's also interesting is certainly, the pandemic obviously challenged your company and others, but even before that, as you were dealing with a previous ownership structure, this is a company that is, has hit 50 years this year, which is a remarkable milestone. But you've seen kind of, you've led this company through many phases and challenges. I'd like you to speak a little bit about that, because sometimes we don't get that glimpse of what do leaders go through during that phase, because that was a lot of, stick handling on your part to broker that deal, but also get the company ready for the future.
It certainly was a challenging time, and just to explain a little bit about that circumstance. So I talked a little bit already about the electrical steel markets and our market being so fantastic and buoyant, but the reality is most of our market for the last 25 years has been in a gradual decline, and our parent company from Europe really struggled still to recover entirely from the 2008 economic crisis.
Wow.
So from 2015-16 to when JFE purchased us at the end of 2019 was a really challenging time, because our company and our ownership group was trying to struggle through high debt and many financial challenges to get through that. And our business has never really been a strategic part of our ownership group in the past until we became part of JFE, because electrical steel is a niche product. And so we weren't getting the investment, we weren't getting the support that we needed to meet the growing demand and the challenges competitively that we were facing. So we were in really a challenging period of time, and we were effectively in some shape or form up for sale for almost 3 years. At one point in time, going through 3 different M&A kind of activities at the same time: merger, acquisition, and some variation of that. So I call that our surviving time. That kind of 3 to 4 year period. Our business was really just trying to survive to get to the point where we had a owner who was prepared to invest, an owner who was prepared to support the strategy and the work that we were doing, and was really aligned with us both culturally and in the market that we have, really committed to long-term sustainable growth and support for this market, which fortunately we got with JFE. I was fortunate to be given a big role in that transition and selection of who the purchaser was. So I had worked with JFE for many, many years. So we got the owner that we wanted, basically. And it's really been a phenomenal transition from September 2019 to today, in terms of creating the alignment, creating the sometimes I'll call it cultural harmony, because Japanese culture is business culture is very different than North American business culture.
Yeah.
And we've done it with a high level of mutual respect. So it's been really a fantastic transition. It's really helped the prospects of our business, both in terms of investment and opportunities for the future. But culturally, it was a really big challenge at the leadership level and below. And we went for, and I still talk about this, we went through a period where we needed to consciously change our thinking from surviving to thriving. Yeah. The money was there, the opportunities there, the market conditions were there for us to really thrive. But it wasn't until we really got into the opportunities that I could see that I could tell that the rest of the company, who didn't have the day-to-day contact with our shareholders in Japan, hadn't gone through that understanding of how strategically aligned we were and the prospects of the future, where people didn't, they were still, even though we were in conditions of thriving and had the support we needed from our parent company, people were still acting in a surviving mode. It's kind of like you had a buffet in front of you of food, but you were still kind of trying to scrimp on the food you're eating because it needed to last for a month. It was kind of like that. And that was a lot harder to get out of the system than I had ever anticipated. And I think to some degree, we're still dealing with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of that, certainly in the work together, right, is because, you have a 50-year-old company, you also had, folks who had been with the company for a period of time, know of the legacy and the history. A big part of what you also, did that I think was effective is really honoring the past, right, and helping value those who contributed to the past, but then to help that transition start to really paint the picture of the future. And it's an extremely bright future, for you and your teams. And so, tell us about how you thought about, that and where you then thought, the work that we started with your leaders was going to be important to helping you continue to make that transition.
I think that's really that's a really important point, because going through the challenge that sorry, I thought I turned that off. Going through the challenges that we did in what I called our survival phase, really, it created in a lot of cases a lot of emotional pain for, people want to do things, but there's no investment, et cetera. So it does it does require some healing, I think is the right way to put it afterwards. And because not everybody knew why certain things needed to be done that were just obvious that we need to do this. Why aren't we doing it? And the constraints that were on us kind of put us in that place. So people who had gone through that were at a different place than new people coming into the company. And so we needed to give that voice. And I think we really needed to work hard at healing that, which isn't easy because it's the level of understanding of what was going on at the time was not always that high, and still isn't, because really I'm the only one that really knows in the depths of it what the survival period was all about. Yeah. So trying to bring in, trying to move forward and get people paying attention to moving forward, especially if they'd worked with the company for a long time. Unless you've healed or forgiven or let the past be the past, it still has too much of an influence on you going forward. Yeah. So we have and continue to work on the mixture between our new folks that only know our business with the bright future and where we are today, with people who've gone through some of those challenges. It's about telling stories so that people understand the richness of the experience, and help them see the current situation as it is in reality, and being able to clearly articulate the vision going forward. And if you keep reinforcing the vision going forward and the expectations and the challenges with that, like we have enormous opportunities, but it's also coming with enormous challenges. Helping people stay focused on those things, helping them stay focused on the vision and what it can be, so that they can solve the problems and the challenges in front of us and take the opportunities without the past having a negative influence on them is something we need to work on every day.
Yeah, because, and I think to your credit, you understood that. I think sometimes we don't always appreciate, and I've seen it with other organizations we work with, don't appreciate the impact of the history and the culture and those who've invested their lives in it, the pride they have with it. But then as you start going, looking to the future, to your point, there's things to value and honor, but then it could be a bit of an anchor to driving future growth. So there you are. You've kind of you navigated that process under the ownership of JFE. You're starting to look to the future, and you realize that one of the ways to support your leaders was kind of focusing on leadership accountability, and kind of walk me through why you thought that was going to be important as one of the mechanisms to help your leaders step up in new ways.
Well, I think leadership accountability is really important work for leaders, especially in an organization that's gone through as much challenge and turmoil as ours has, and describing the transition that I talked about. There's a couple of things that are really challenging for people. I really believe in an interdependent leadership style. And for those who may not understand what that means, there's been studies done to differentiate interdependent leadership styles from dependent leadership styles to more hierarchical styles. And given the volatility and the ambiguity that our business deals with, we really need our team and leaders to be able to navigate day-to-day challenges or course corrections that came from unforeseen circumstances. Last fall, one of our larger clients called us and said, I need to increase my you need to increase your production for me by 30%. And I said, when? And they said 3 weeks ago. And that's also a company, Vince, that's gone through your training and introduced us originally. And that was at a time when we were struggling with getting the labor market situation that we needed. and we were trying to maximize the output of the production we had and the resources. So those challenges really are big, and you need to be able to work together to do that. And one of the things that I like so much about the way that the training has structured this, you start with self-accountability. People want to quickly go to accountability on other people towards them.
Right.
But it's so important to start with accountability to yourself and being trustworthy and being prepared to say, okay, I made a commitment to this and I am accountable to this first, and be kind of set the table for that, as opposed to starting with all these other people are accountable to me. So I think the self-accountability, the team accountability, the company and cultural accountability are really important layers to go through that, because a lot of people, for many people, especially if you're dealing with challenging, growing organizations that really stretch the capabilities of the leaders, if you haven't really deeply grounded the personal accountability part of that, it's going to create a lot of problems. And we have had, which I know is an experience as you go through this with your clients in training, we have had people that can't make that transition.
Right.
And I think with post-pandemic factors, with labor market factors, and a massively growing business demand, that's made it even more challenging and really did not afford us the time to work through some of those things in the way that I might have liked to. And we've had to make changes to make sure that we were delivering for our clients and being set ourselves up specifically to deal with the opportunities and challenges of the future.
Yeah.
If people get stuck, they're stuck, and you can do all you can to try to help them see that they're stuck. But if they don't accept that they're stuck, my accountability is to take action on that.
Yeah. Well, and I think there, a couple of really good insights in terms of what you shared there, right? As anytime, companies at an inflection point or dealing with, as you were, quite a bit of complexity and challenge, it does stretch the capability of leaders. And often it's like, so what's the best way, that's the fastest way to support leaders to step up in new ways. And, that's a big focus of our work, obviously. But you're right. Then in the implementation, leaders do have, using my language, a decision to make. And some kind of look at what's coming and don't have the will, basically say, I'm kind of done. And they kind of step away on their own right. And others, you come to realize, whether there's a misalignment or the capability just won't get there, that then there's another discussion that needs to happen. And I think that that's some of the hard work when you're trying to, transform a leadership culture, build a stronger community, that a lot of times organizations underestimate that needs to happen. So thank you for sharing that. So what have you, if you kind of think of where were, your leaders before, and what were some of the gaps you were feeling needing to be addressed, and kind of where are they now? And what has been, because one of the byproducts of our work is a, JFE specific, leadership contract. What have you seen now since implementing this work, how things have shifted with your leaders?
I think a couple things. You need to continue to refer back to the leadership contract, especially if you have a very dynamic, challenging business environment, because people easily fall into old habits and behaviors and thinking. And that needs to be a front and center part of that. The one area that I have continued to struggle, and I think this is a challenge for many organizations, is if you're facing the kind of volatility the post-pandemic circumstances have created, new challenges, new problems, that kind of thing. The most difficult part, I find, of the whole process at leadership is peer-to-peer accountability.
Right.
So if people are feeling stuck, the first thing they look to is okay, if it's a cross-functional challenge, or the solution needs to be implemented cross-functionally. The challenge is that if the two leaders in that area don't really wrestle with their own perspectives on the problem or the challenge and work through it to create the end result, they're both looking at me to solve it for them. Or because, okay, well, the other guy's the problem, I'm not the problem, I'm accountable, but this person's not doing their job, so what are you going to do about that?
Right.
That dynamic and the construct of the hierarchical organization that we inherited centuries ago from the military doesn't work in that environment. But what makes it work is the capacity for individual accountability to move to team accountability, where those team members are working extremely well together. And where we've succeeded, it's been when those teams or when those individual leaders have evolved to, okay, I need to take accountability of what's coming on to me, and I need to work with you, even if we have to have tough conversations, we have very strong disagreements, whatever it is, we got to find a way. Not start that journey, realize it's not a lot of fun and there's too much friction, and just say, and back off, and then say, okay, that's for Ron to figure out for us. Where we've been successful, the leaders have engaged in that challenge. Where we've struggled is where they haven't.
Yeah, and you're in good company, because, as you know, certainly through our research, we find that area of shared accountability among leaders to be always the lowest rated item in the organizations we work with. And I think as we look to the future, and to your point, you've raised that, right? I mean, leadership is more distributed today. We need strength of leadership accountability at all levels, and this sort of going up to resolve issues just is an outdated model. We need leaders to come together, and yet there's still a hesitancy. And I really feel the organizations that can create leadership cultures where that's expected and it's supported, I think are the ones that are going to win. Because to your point, if you and I are butting heads and we can't sit in a room, whether it's in person or virtual, to really hash through the issue to get the company to that next level, and instead we retreat, we're stuck. And that holds the company back, holds our teams back. And that's becoming clearer and clearer in our work, and yours is a good example of that. And what we've also found is sometimes, and it's why we focused with your leaders on really trying to build that sense of community, because a lot of times we don't invest in building relationships with one another. So we're trying to address these thorny issues in the absence of a relationship. And I know that you've also pursued work around dialogue and whatnot. I'd like you to speak to that, because I think what you've done there is also very important. Another important element that supports leaders to be able to have these conversations in an open and very business-like manner to get through the best resolution.
So there's two things I'd talk about with that. I think first, it's certainly been my experience that to the research and work that you've done, that peer-to-peer accountability and being able to resolve cross-functional difficult challenges is so important. And one of the things I've realized through this is it's kind of like the problem needs to be solved at the level below the symptoms. And the more I've looked at this and experienced it, the reason people have cross-functional challenges or peer-to-peer challenges is more to do with their personal accountability than their team accountability skills. So if you haven't really nailed I got to look at myself first and how I'm contributing to this situation. If you haven't got that, it will manifest like peer-to-peer accountability challenges, but it really starts with the fact that they haven't really grounded the personal accountability part of that. So getting to the company accountability, the one company mindset, often is disabled by the fact that people haven't really accepted that they need to look at difficult circumstances and what am I missing in terms of what I do with this? Because they so quickly can see what the other person's not doing right, that they skip past their own accountability.
Yeah. And so, you're so right. And sort of, what we talk about, accountability breeds accountability, but it's got to start with us, right? I can't expect it in others if I'm not prepared to set the tone. And that's certainly, a theme we explored with your leaders. So as you kind of sit back.
So if you want me to talk about the dialogue part of that, I didn't answer your question on that part. Is that, so I had the opportunity about a year ago or so to participate in one of the most profound training sessions I have ever had in terms of behavioral skill. It was on dialogue, and it was done by a company that actually is professional actors who are now consulting or doing consulting and training work with businesses, and it reframed the kind of conversation. So your leader accountability training talks a lot about having the hard conversation. And what the dialogue training did is give us a set of principles and skills that really, set the process and the framework and of practicing dialogue. And we've introduced that now to 2 or 3 of our teams. And the feedback after it is just off the charts in terms of how great this training was. It was really good. And it's easy to kind of get there and everyone sees it. But again, it's worked in some places really, really well.
Yeah.
But it's got stuck other places. So even people understand the concept of dialogue. What happens is when they start having dialogue, if it gets a little heated,
right,
and different people, different opinions come to the table, even though they know how to work through the conversation and dialogue with that, it falls apart because self-accountability disappears and they start judging the other person. And then they retreat, and then there is no more dialogue. And one of the most profound things that I heard from the team that did this training with us is dialogue really only requires one person. So we think, dialogue requires 2 people, but really to have meaningful dialogue, one person needs to be the engager of that. So so I translate that to, if you have a cross-functional leadership problem and your people are really wrestling what they need to do, it doesn't take both of them to agree to dialogue. It just needs to take one person to keep the process going and not give up, because you will eventually get there.
Yeah.
But one person has to stay in the conversation and initiate it, not 2. And I remind people that all the time. If people come to me and say, well, I can't really resolve this problem because person A won't talk to me. Well, remember, it only takes one person to dialogue. One person's got to start it and keep the engine going. The other person will eventually come along.
Yeah, and that's that personal accountability that you referenced for sure. So thank you for adding that element and that insight around dialogue. So I want to start bringing the conversation to a close, and would just love to get your perspective on, as the president and CEO, from where you sit, what have you learned about, what's critical for a CEO to pay attention to when they need to scale leadership accountability, among their leaders?
I think what has been important is consistency, and I think it's really important to constantly remind people and work through as I said, the problem was one level below where the symptom is, and it tends to often be rooted in personal accountability. So if personal accountability, and when I say personal accountability, I really look at that and say, okay, if we've run into a problem, how have I contributed to this problem? Not, sorry, that's phone keeps ringing. It's not just about tackling a problem, if you start with how have I contributed to this problem, how do I need to be accountable towards the solution, as opposed to who caused this problem to me, I think that it's always seems to start there, and that's often where it gets stuck. So we need to keep looking at, are people really looking at their own personal accountability first, and is that really where the problem is? So a practice of consistency in terms of the standards that are created in the leadership contract, but also always be on the eye for, is this happening because the person's not really being personally accountable? Is this happening? And often that's the case, because it's almost like the team accountability becomes so much easier if everyone's acting personally accountable to their contribution to the solution or contribution to how we got here. I think that's so important for that, and also an expectation that teams should work very hard to do and go as far as they can to solve their own problems, as opposed to constantly relying on moving up the organizational chain to have someone senior to solve the problems because we just can't get along. And one of the things that we've started talking about, because when people and teams get into situations where they have this kind of conflict, if you allow the concept of agree to disagree to be an out, you'll find people quickly agree to disagree. So what I try to do when I'm involved in that and when I see it is I remind people, hold on, agreeing to disagree is not an acceptable outcome. You need to work through this to resolution, not to, oh, we agree to disagree. Because if you agree to disagree, that's a step in the direction of breaking down the one company mindset.
Yeah. So you've referenced that whole notion of the one company mindset a few times. So given where your leaders were to where they are now, what kind of shifts have you seen in a positive direction that you've got to keep building off of?
I think we have certainly seen with a lot of our leaders an enormous amount of progress, enthusiasm, and excitement about the future, because they see the opportunities in front of us and see how our company's approaching and tackling them. And once you can create a one company mindset, or even if it's not the whole company, it's a group of people working on a problem with a one mindset with that, it really moves things forward and solves the problem much more quickly. The interesting thing for our experience too, in terms of one company mindset, is that is very aligned with Japanese business philosophy and culture. Mm-hmm. When I first talked to our team in Japan about this, and you and I talked to some of our expats that are working here, they're kind of scratching their heads saying, okay, why do you need to create one company mindset? Because in Japanese culture, that legacy culture anyway is so deep that we're all on the same mission.
Right.
It's expected that you are one company mindset, where in Western businesses, you start with the individual and move hopefully in the direction of having a common vision. And it's been really interesting reflecting on Japanese business culture and helping them understand that alignment and harmony isn't happening automatically in our business like it does in Japanese businesses. We need to really work at that on a day-to-day basis. And it's something we need to inspire people to do. They don't show up to work with that sense of duty and that sense of responsibility automatically with that. So it's been a really interesting experience. And I've introduced some of the things that we've talked about with our Japanese ownership group too. One of the principles we started the work with them when ownership changed was we were going to proceed with harmony, respect, and in the pursuit of alignment, which is really, okay, we're going to work together to take your company and our Japanese company and create a one company mindset. But the expectation wasn't that that was going to happen overnight.
Right.
Where Western companies come in and say, oh, okay, well, okay, we now own you. This is the way we do things around here, and you're going to start doing them that way. And they start making cuts or changes or whatever. Nowhere does that change actually ever address the cultural differences in the buying company and the acquired company. And I think the way we experienced it with JFE was so much better when you started with this idea. We're going to work through this over the next few years with mutual respect, harmony, and to create alignment. And the term harmony was really interesting. I still explain it to everybody here today. In Western culture, harmony means kind of we get along, and
Right.
we can coexist without screaming at each other. Harmony in Japanese culture means we are of one mind.
Yeah.
And some businesses that work with Japanese companies get really frustrated how long it takes to make a decision and work through things, but that's what it takes to create. They don't really pursue something unless they work through it to the point where they are of one, everyone is of one mind of that solution. And I think that's one of the things that we've really tried to do in the dialogue training and accountability training is bring some of this all together.
Yeah.
But you're still fighting Western culture, Western beliefs. We do, given our growth and various other reasons, we have lots of new people coming in that bring the old belief systems of hierarchical structure and how we solve problems around here. So it's a constant evolving change that we need to keep paying attention to. And the leadership accountability training has really given us a framework to talk about that and move it forward as best and as quickly as we can. Because we're often really battling a very legacy military hierarchical culture that does not, accountability starts with what the guy at the top says.
Right.
But Western businesses need so much more in such an ambiguous, volatile environment that we're dealing with today.
Yeah. Yeah, great perspectives. Thank you for going deeper on that, because it's really valuable. So our last question, what we ask of every podcast guest is, so what advice do you have for young leaders who some are just entering the workforce or some are just moving into their first formal leadership role within organizations? As you look over the next 3 to 5 years, what perspectives would you share for them to be as effective as they can be as leaders?
I think the first thing I would say is learn and understand the stories of leaders who've been successful, but don't learn what to do from that, because the experiences that somebody like me over my career have been successful, the circumstances around that are different going forward than they are today. But learn from the experience in terms of what has worked, not worked for me under those circumstances, and really learn those stories so that you can apply that, particularly as it relates to people. I think the second thing is really hone your people skills, your emotional intelligence, and your capacity to really work with, in a deep way, other people, even if you have challenging circumstances. One thing that I think I'll speak to Canadian business people are not so typically good at all levels of the organization is managing productive conflict. To me, leaders need to be able to have the ability to have their team be greater than the sum of their parts. And that requires accountability, that requires dialogue, that requires the time and energy to make sure that everyone's focused in the right direction. So I think those are really important skills for leaders going forward today. The technical skills will come, but it's the emotional intelligence, it's the people skills that are ever increasingly more important going forward to be able to help deliver on the results that we need and build the confidence that we're going to be able to lead ourselves and our teams going forward. The last thing I'd say probably is constantly work on yourself and your own development and your own journey. Because if you're not constantly working on yourself, your own growth and own development at a deeper level, you're going to hit a ceiling faster than your capabilities are and you have the potential for.
Awesome. Amazing insights. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for taking time to be with us. And
Great.
wishing you and your leaders, much success as you continue to lead the future, one that obviously is bright and challenging. So thanks so much, Ron, for making time on the Lead the Future podcast.
Thanks, Vince, and best of luck to all your work. And we really appreciate everything you are doing and have done in terms of helping move our team forward with all of that. And thanks for the opportunity to chat today. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.